Hello, everyone. This is What Your Pastor Didn't Tell You. Today, I am on with Stéphanie Anthonioz, if I pronounced that right. We're going to be talking about the biblical cherubim, or however you pronounce that, and its transformation, its mutation through the centuries, how the original writers of the Hebrew Bible would have understood this idea of a cherubim, and then how our views and later views changed their perspective on it that give us what we kind of see them as today, these spiritual beings. How are you doing today, Dr. Anthonioz, if I pronounced that right?
Anthonioz. Yes, very good. Thank you. I'm very happy to be here with you.
Yeah, my pleasure. So you've written a number on this topic, and this paper really stood out. So there's going to be a link in the description. It'll only be in French, sadly, but people can check it out and use Google Translate if they need to. But in this paper, you wrote about this transformation, how people through the centuries kind of changed their understanding of this, which affects our view today. In that paper, could you talk about just in 5 minutes a good little summary of what you argued in that?
Okay, as a historian of the Bible, so I am interested in looking in different objects, and this object was the Cherubim, as we say in Hebrew, and they have been received as angels. Usually, when we think of cherubim, seraphim, archangels, we think angels with the wings and celestial being around the deity. And as a historian, then I looking not so much at the way these celestial beings were received in theology and iconography, but what was the roots? What were the roots of their representation as hybrid or composite creatures, as we have them in Ezekiel, but already as winged creatures in the book of Exodus or in the Kings, and very close to the deity. So I'm interested to see across the ancient Near East cultures at these creatures, composite creatures, close to the deity, and how they protect and defend and represent the deity. But it's no question of angels at that time, at that moment.
Yeah, so this idea of an angel, what you're saying, didn't exist in the original minds of the Hebrew writers.
No, yes, because angels, it's an angelos, angeloi, it's a Greek translation of what we have in Hebrew, which is malach, and the root la'ar in Hebrew, it is about being missioned with a message. And these melachim, in the plural, they are used of human messengers as well as in some context of divine messengers. So nowhere in the Hebrew Bible are these other creatures, composite celestial creatures like cherubim or seraphim, called melachim. They are not angels. They are not messengers. Their function is different from bringing a message. But if we look at their representation, then we see that they are hybrid, and so they have animal parts that speak of another world. They refer to another world, the divine world, and they kind of mediate that other world. So this is what I was interested in. And it's also, maybe we can, at this point, mention how during the Christian era, Pseudo-Dionysius, as you have the nice representation of a church, he, in a book called The Celestial Hierarchy, so Perites Uraniou Hierarchias in Greek, he tried of ordered all these celestial beings, which had become very numerous in the beginning of the Christian era and also in the Judaic sources. He tried to order them and he proposed a 9 order of these beings, and close to Christ at the bottom of the image you have seraphim and cherubim, and then you have other orders which are called thrones, dominations, virtues, powers, but also archangels, angels, and principalities. So at that time, we may consider that cherubim have entered the celestial hierarchy and they are part of the angelic world. And this is what we find until today when we think of this creature. There is maybe another point that we can talk about now is, and maybe you have in mind when we think of cherubim, little childish angels. And this is also an interesting moment in the transmission of this concept of cherubim. And I don't know if we say it now, because this is, or maybe later after we have read the biblical testimonies. Yeah, maybe I will come back to it later when we have read and discussed about the biblical testimonies of cherubim.
Okay, yeah, awesome. Sounds good. So just for my audience's sake, so what we were showing on the screen there was a representation from this person. I'm not pronouncing it right, but Pseudo Dionysius the Areopagite, and he was writing 5th to early 6th century, somewhere around there.
Yes.
And he had this idea of 9 orders of angels, essentially.
Yes, because often we speak of angelology in the beginning of the Christian era, but historians will not speak of angelology as a science, because there are many angels with many names. Some are collective groups, other individuals, and so we cannot speak of angelology. At the same time, we see this demultiplication of celestial beings around the one and only deity. So it's very interesting because we have lost the pantheon, the multiplicity of gods. We have one God, but so many celestial beings. And Pseudo Dionysius is a very interesting author, as he tries to give some order into this world. And so this representation actually is taken from a church much later. I think it is in Firenze. Okay. But it shows, it is a nice representation of these 9 orders that come from Pseudo Dionysius.
Very fascinating. Okay, so let's talk about the biblical text now. So yeah. Could you talk about the different biblical texts, whether Exodus, Ezekiel, Genesis 3, how the biblical text views and talks about the cherubim?
Yes, so we are usually speaking of cherubim in the plural, but we have also in the Hebrew Bible cherub, which is the singular. And these cherub and cherubim, they are attested in the book of Genesis. So in the beginning, in the Eden narrative, and maybe we all remember how after having eaten the fruit from the tree of knowledge, then cherubim, they are placed to protect the tree of life, unless man and woman would become immortal, one like God. So we have there the cherubim in arm. They are protecting and defending the tree of life. So this is one testimony to this cherubim. And we know them mostly from the construction of the sanctuary in the desert, so the book of Exodus, and the realization of the sanctuary in the book of Kings, the Temple of Solomon. And in these are maybe the most common witnesses that we have. and we will take time to go through these witnesses. And after we have the cherubim from the vision of Ezekiel. And sometimes we remember them from this vision because they are so well described. So if we look at the Ark of the Covenant in the book of Exodus, then we have this, the idea that two cherubim are made of gold and iron, and they stand at the end of the mercy seat. So their wings are covering the mercy seat, which is the place where the deity is supposed to come and speak to the children of Israel. So you can find these references in Exodus 25, verse 18, and verse 19, which is a little bit insisting that one cherub stands at one side of the mercy seat and another cherub stands at the other side. So there are two cherubim, but they are spoken of in the singular. One cherub at one side of the mercy seat. So we say they spring their wings, and they are, the verb is sarach in Hebrew, so they are covering, they are protecting the mercy seat. And I think this gives really one of the important functions of the cherubim in the Hebrew Bible, as other hybrid creatures in the ancient Near East, that they are a manifestation of the divine, and they have this liminal function that they introduce to the other world that is the divine world, from where the deity himself speaks. This is what he says. And when we still read chapter 25, verse 22, I will meet with you. If I read what the dia is showing there above the cover between the two cherubim that are over the Ark of the Covenant, lo, I will meet with you and give you all my commands for the Israelite. So I think we are introduced with this text to what hybrid creatures, composite creatures, represent in the cultures of the ancient Near East. That they, well, I repeat myself, but they have this liminal and introductory function of pointing to the divine world, and yet the entrance is not just open for everyone, of course, to go in, so they are so protecting. And this is why, in a kind of metonymic relationship, they also represent the divine. And I think this is exactly why they will, in the end, in the reception, in the Christian and Judaic reception, they will enter the close companionship of the deity, because in this liminal function, which is almost metonymic, they finally represent the divine, the deity who cannot be represented in the Hebrew Bible, as other ancient cultures also do not represent their deity. So this is the first thing. This is in the book of Exodus. So the construction of the sanctuary of the desert, we meet them. And then, very interestingly, when the temple is built, so we have to jump to the book of Kings, the first book of Kings, chapter 6, verse 23. And we have Solomon, who is busy with building the temple. And he made in the sanctuary two cherubim of olive wood. And this wood will be in verse, so 1 King chapter 6, verse 28. So if we want to quote, we can start reading from verse 23 to verse 28, and then we have to read also 1 Kings chapter 8, but then we can speak about it later. In this passage, the wood is olive wood, and it will be covered with gold. So we keep this notion of gold, which is the brilliancy, which is very close to what fire represents, because in Ezekiel, Daniel, and Enoch, then we will see how interestingly cherubim are called fire cherubim. But this already is what the gold stands for, as brilliant. And in this description, we have also their dimension. The Hebrew says 10 cubits high, which is quite high for this representation. So we still have two. We still have two cherubim. Verse 24, their dimensions are specified. 5 cubits for the wing of one cherub, 5 cubits for the other one, 10 cubits from the tips of its wings to the tips of its wings. So we have this kind of dimensions that are very important. And if we go on reading, so line 27, he placed the cherubim inside the innermost room of the temple with their wings spread out. So, of course, in reading this text, we are reminded of the Ark of the Covenant. But we are not speaking about the Ark of the Covenant. We are speaking about the entrance to the Holy of Holies in the temple. And then we have to go to 1 Kings chapter 8, verse 6, because chapter 8, verse 6, because when the temple is built, then we can read the priests brought the Ark of the Covenant into its place, into the sanctuary of the house, into the holies of holies, under the wings of the cherubim. So you have the representation where 2 huge cherubim have been built, and when the temple is finished, then the priest brings in the Ark of the Covenant with its 2 cherubim on each side. And so the final representation of this Holy of Holies, you can count 4 cherubim. And I think this is very interesting, because when we read the book of Ezekiel, the answer is very simple. Why do we find 4 cherubim in Ezekiel representation of the holy throne, of the divine throne, of the glory of God, Kavod Elohim Adonai? It's really a reading of the book of Exodus and Kings in their chronological order. In the vision of God, Ezekiel is priest. He is son of Buzi the priest. He is in the Holy of Holies. What he sees is exactly what is described in Exodus and Kings. It is what he sees, 4 cherubim. So that is why I think going into the chronological order of the Bible is very interesting, because historians consider that the book of Ezekiel is a later prophetic writing. It comes after Isaiah, it comes after Jeremiah and the destruction of the temple. So it comes after, with the reconstruction of the temple. And so it's very interesting to see. Of course, we do not have an archaeological way of infirming how the first temple, the Temple of Solomon, was, but at least we have a literary description and its exploitation by the scribes of the book of Ezekiel. And there is another thing that is very interesting, is that cherubim, they have this function that we have been describing for the mercy seat and the Holy of Holies, but they are also present in the temple as decorative motifs. So there are many, you find them already with the Ark of the Covenant in Exodus 26. verse 1, you can read that the curtains are decorated, and they are decorated with colors are given, blue, purple, scarlet, and you have the cherubim. So they are also part of the decoration of the temple, of the Ark of the Covenant. And at the end of the chapter, also you find them at line 31. It's a repetition: veil of blue, purple, and scarlet, and decorated with cherubim. And it's the same also, and maybe in the Book of Kings it is more detailed, because so the walls of the house of the temple are decorated with carved figure of cherubim. This is in the Book of Kings, so chapter 6, verse 29, and cherubim are decorating the walls along with palm trees and also half-open flowers. And this is repeated also verse 32. And maybe more interesting for our purpose, because after we are going to speak about Ezekiel, is 1 Kings chapter 7. Chapter 7 of 1 Kings, because on verse 29, these decorations are cherubim along with lions and oxen, bulls. And these are ornamenting the walls and the panels and even the furniture. In 1 Kings chapter 7, this time verse 36, they are engraving the tables, the handles, the panels. So I think this is really interesting, because we have here not only vegetal motifs with the palm trees and the half-open flowers, but we have the animal world with the lion and bull, who represent the strength, no? And these figures are precisely those that we will read in the book of Ezekiel. No, when we come to Ezekiel, we see that these celestial beings have 4 faces: the face of human, the face of the bull, the face of the lion, and the face of the cherubim. So that is why I think it's really interesting. And also, I repeat myself, but we cannot have historical approach to how the temple, historically, the first temple was organized and decorated. So we only have the information through these texts. And of course, in a historical approach, we can only look at texts through their transmission. They cannot be viewed as describing the reality. No, they were transmitted, they were sometimes corrected, and they had, of course, a theological intention. But in reading the book of Ezekiel, after this description of the sanctuary and the temple, then you really understand how scribes were nurtured by these sacred writings. So the vision of Ezekiel, historians do not know if Ezekiel was, you can say that Isaiah is, there are many references into Jeremiah who lived before the exile and during the exile. So we have some historical clues. For the prophet of Ezekiel, it's much more difficult to find historical clues, also because his prophetism is very charismatic. If you remember, he goes from one place to the other in the sky. And so historically, it is more difficult for historians, of course, I'm only speaking for historians, to assert the historicity of the prophet. But through his writings, you see that scribes were really nourished by these sacred writings. And so the vision of Ezekiel corresponds exactly to what a priest or the Kohen Agadol, the great priest, would have seen in the Holy of Holies. And if you want, we can come to the book of Ezekiel. It's also, so we said for the historians, this book is certainly written during the Persian Achaemenid period at the earliest, and the scribes are rereading ancient sources, the temple sources, the sanctuary of the temple. The temple has been destroyed. It is reconstructed, but then for the same reason as for the first temple, we do not have access to the Holy Mount. So we are only left with these witnesses. Anyhow, in the book opens with this vision of Ezekiel, and he sees rayot, which are, we can say, creatures, or we could even say animals. And these rayot, they are named Cherubim, so cherubim, only in chapter 10. So, so this is also an interesting thing, because the vision is almost the same. These rayot, cherubim, they have 4 faces. So the human face, the lion face, the cherub face, and the eagle face. Only there is a small disruption with the Ezekiel 1, because in Ezekiel chapter 1, there is no bull, there is no cherub, there is a bull. Chayot are represented with human face, lion face, bull face, and eagle face. And the bull is replaced in chapter 10 with the cherub face. So this is one point. We will speak about it later on. But this is a small distortion. And the other thing that is very interesting in this vision, so as we have read now the books of Exodus and Kings, we understand why these faces are animal and why they appear in Ezekiel's vision. But there is something new, is the wheel that goes along with them, the wheel that goes with them. And if we look at representation, this is why we will speak about Enuma Elish. If you, maybe I can, let me see if I can share. I had prepared one. Yes. Can you share that one?
Let's see here.
Yes, this is the one. I just went Google Eyes, and when you look at the vision of Ezekiel, you find all kind of different representation. Some have one wheel, like if you look at this one, you see the wheel in front of the deity, you see the creatures around, and you imagine that you have a wheel at each side and a wheel behind. This is the representation from Chagall, so wheels have disappeared. You have a representation that will show a chariot. So you have 4 wheels that allow the chariot to go on. But you have also wheels that are represented in parallel order. And you have, interestingly, wheels that are one within the other. And so you have the idea, when you look at this representation, that Ezekiel's vision is very difficult to conceive, to represent. And it is true, now we cannot do that, but if we took the text in Hebrew, you can understand in diverse manner. So it is about something that is inconceivable. You know, these wings can go in the 4 directions. They can go in the same directions as one face will go in one direction. And I think this is really very interesting, because it speaks about the inconceivability, the irrepresentability of what divine must be, that is investing time and space. And the fact that these creatures, they might go each in its way, according to its face, along with its will, means that they invest the space in this four-directional dimension. So I think this is very interesting. And when we read Enuma Elish, the creation of Marduk, we will be able to compare the way the ancient and already Mesopotamia and Babylonia in the writing of Enuma Elish, they considered that divine was beyond representability. And I think this is really very interesting. The other thing about this wheel, that is, it can remind us of two different things. The chariot, you might think of the weather gods, like the Baalim in ancient Israel, and historians consider that the deity, so you can, the tetragram, Yahweh Adonai, read Adonai, has taken on many attributes from the Baalim. And so you have in the Psalms, for example, the idea that Adonai Elohim is riding over the clouds. So the chariot is reminiscent of this idea that God, as a weather god, rides over the clouds. But the wheel is also reminiscent of another aspect of the cosmos, that is the sun. And you imagine that the sun is a circle, and of course it runs, according to the ancient conception, across the sky, in below the earth, and comes over in the morning. And so you have this kind of representation that speaks about solar aspects of the divine here. So this vision of Ezekiel is very rich, and that is why we cannot say it's very old, because it takes in many attributes of ancient deities, weather gods, and also solar god. And that makes it really a beautiful object to study. So I think we have covered most of the testimony, the witness to the Cherubim in the Hebrew Bible. There are some other attestations, so maybe you are familiar with this divine epithet, the one who sits on the cherubim. And you can find this epithet, Yoshev HaKeruvim, in many different books. But you understand that this is just an evidence when we have read the narratives of the sanctuary and the temple, and also the book of Ezekiel. So I think we covered all, yes, I think we covered most of the important witnesses for our talk now.
Yeah. So real quick, could just for specifics, where in the Enuma Elish does Marduk? Where do they talk about him being like inconceivable?
Yes.
And yeah, I guess we could go ahead and get into that in general. So
yes, okay.
Yeah.
I just, if you want to share, I just quoted I prepared that dia because I thought it would be interesting. So it is at the beginning, it's tablet 1. So you remember Enuma Elish is made of 7 tablets and written in cuneiform. And here you have the translation of, so lines 79 to 104. And what is happening here is that Marduk is conceived. So you read line 80, the wisest of the wise, the sage of the god, Bel, was conceived. So he is the son of Ea, the god of wisdom, and of Damkina. And line 89, you have Anu, father of Ea, so grandfather, who is filled with joy at the birth of Marduk because he's remarkable. And then there is a physical description. 93, you can read his members were incomprehensibly wonderful. The translation is taken from Wilfrid Lambert, Mesopotamian Christian Stories. And line 94, incapable of being grasped with the mind, hard even to look on, 4 were his eyes and 4 his ears.
Wow.
And you have reference to fire, flame shot forth as he moved his lips. His 4 ears grew large, his eyes likewise took in everything. So this figure, as line 99 says, was lofty, superior in comparison with the gods. His limbs surpassing his nature superior, called Mahiutu, literally son of God, clothed with the aura of 10 gods. And what I find really interesting in this passage, that the god Marduk, in a way similar to the vision of Ezekiel, is dotted with 4 eyes, and so that it can look in every direction at the same time. So this is extraordinary. And this 4 dimension is referring to the 4 cosmic directions. So this is this power to comprehend the whole universe in at one time. And this is what the throne of the deity does in the vision of Ezekiel, to encompass the whole universe, to invest the whole universe at once. Marduk does this through his eyes, and the divine throne does it through the wheels and the cherubim.
Yeah, that's very fascinating. Was there any other parallels with Marduk and the Ezekiel text, or did you have anything else on that?
On the vision, no, I was struck by no, I don't think.
Just making sure we didn't miss anything. Okay,
no,
cool.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. All right, no, that's really, really fascinating. What I find interesting about that is I'm not aware of any pictures or iconography of Marduk where he has more than 2 eyes.
No, yeah, you are right. This, I mean, I think a Syriologist would be more to speak about that, but we have no representation. We have representation of Marduk on seals, and the one that I've put on this dia is it's not even sure it's Marduk. It could be Nabu.
Yeah.
But this is what the common this is the common representation that is used. So no, and very often this is a pity. Sometimes we have iconography for different objects, but no texts, and often we have texts but no iconography no representation for this text. So this is a pity. Yeah, this is a pity.
Darn, what a struggle. Okay, all right. So that's. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about in the Ezekiel text in general?
There is one thing is about the comparative approach. Before we turn to how these cherubim became angels with the transition in the book of Enoch, I think we can just remind that in the historical approach and comparative approach, these hybrid creatures are really well known in the ancient Near East. So you have the Sphinx with the leonine body, the wings, and the human head, and they come from Greece. But they are very interesting because of the myth of being of losing life, and Oedipus in responding to the enigma will give life again. So I think this is very interesting to have in mind when we look at the cherubim in the Genesis. But we have in the Khorsabad, in the palace, these winged bulls that have often been identified with the Cherubim. Now, in the book that we were talking in the beginning, in this book, there is my colleague, Assyriologist Philippe Abrahami. He wrote an article, and he shows very well that these winged bulls are not Cherubim, and they have been now identified with Alad Lamu, but they are hybrid creatures that are called caribou and kouribou. So both are attested, and so he speaks about these creatures for which we have no representation, but the root is the same, K, R, and B, karav, which is about blessing and praying. And I think this is also interesting when we are speaking about the function of these creatures. The Alad Lamu, they are also standing at the doors of the temple, so they are protecting, blessing, and marking also the frontier, the border. You are entering another world, the world of the king, which is a royal mediator, which is sacred. And in Egypt, you have also this, we call them sphinx nowadays, but the Egyptians themselves, they call them Sechep Ankh. And I think this is very interesting because they speak of living image. And of course, when you refer to the divine, I find it very interesting that these are living images, that the image speaks of more than just the materiality of it. And in the Levant, I just want to show you that these hybrid creatures were very common. You have the sarcophagus of Hiram, which you see the lions supporting the sarcophagus, but also you can see maybe the royal throne, which is with this sphinx, the lions, with the winged lions, and these are attested very well in the Levant. And you have another image from an ivory from Megiddo, but you have also thrones of the deity Astarte. And so this is really interesting in the historical approach because it just confirms what the function of these creatures are. So their cherubim are like all these different witnesses. They mediate the divine, they introduce, but they also protect and defend.
Yeah,
yeah.
I was just going to say that makes a lot of sense with how they're used in the biblical text, the Hebrew Bible, as they're on the curtain and over the
walls.
Yeah, on the walls and on the Ark of the Covenant. Yeah, it makes sense.
Yes, and the furniture also. Yeah.
So
when you look at this is what we can say. When you look in a historical approach to these creatures, you see very well that they, in no way, they correspond to angels, messengers with the message to bring from someone to somebody. No, their function is very specific, and they do not deliver messages. I think that is really what we can tell today in light of all this documentation.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, that's a very good point there. Awesome. All right. Anything else on that before we talk about the transformation there?
No, I think we can move on now.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Awesome. All right. So, so something you point out in the paper is the Book of Enoch, which is technically there's different texts and they're written at different time periods, but could you talk about how Enoch, that text, portrays these cherubim?
Yes, so as you say, the book of Enoch is very difficult to study historically, because we think that the most ancient books are dated by the specialist in the 3rd century BCE. And so we have some fragments in the Qumran manuscript. But the transmission of Enoch and with the different books is quite long into the Middle Ages, and transmission in Greek and other languages. So sometimes it's difficult to say what is really dated to the 3rd century BCE. However, I think it's a very interesting document to look at, because when we read 1 Enoch, so the first book of Enoch, in chapter 14, you see that I don't know if you want me to oh, you have the text, wonderful. And the ceiling was like shooting stars and lightning flashes, and among them fiery cherubim or cherubim. Their heaven was water. So what we have in Enoch is a vision of Enoch, and Enoch, who is the wise, and in a literary way, this book is nourished from the book of Ezekiel and also the book of Daniel, the vision from the book of Daniel. So it would be very interesting on the topic of vision to have this comparative approach with Ezekiel, Daniel, and Enoch. What we have read already is our cherubim, of course. We have seen how they were connected already with fire. And this is what you find here, that they are fiery cherubim. So the vision, maybe I have I can read a little bit more. You have clouds in that vision that Enoch witnesses. You have shooting stars, lightnings, and in my vision, winds took me on their wings. So this is very familiar for someone who has read the Bible, because we were speaking about the deity riding over the winds. But you have this image here, and of course you think of Ezekiel and Daniel, who are transported from one place to the other, lifted me up. You find it written in the book of Ezekiel, and carried me to the heaven. So here it's different, because Enoch is visiting the different heavens. And when he comes to the palace, he sees a wall built of hailstones surrounded by tongues of fire. And you have different oxymoron. And I think that just as the 4 dimensions of the throne and of Marduk speak about the all-powerful deity, you have in Enoch this oxymoron. They associate fire and ice, water and fire, and all this speaks about the this inconceivability, I don't know if you can say that in English, of the deity. And it is in this vision that with the shooting stars, lightning, as we had just read, that the cherubim are seen. So this is really coherent with all that we have said. But when you continue reading, you'll find a little, so this is chapter 14, we were reading line 11, but if you go on a little bit, verse line 20, the Most High was seated, his robe was brighter than the sun and whiter than any snow. And then you have 22, fire blazed all around, a great fire rose up all around, a myriad of myriads stood before him. The most holy of his angels, those who approach him, who do not depart by night or leave him. And then you realize that the description of the divine throne, it takes in the presence of angels that watch him day and night, day and night. So the presence of this cherubim of fire is interesting in their mutation, because they are entering the order of angels. They stand with them at the throne of God. So this is what I found interesting, and this is developed even furthermore in 1 Enoch chapter 71 this time. And this is the text that we can cite, quote, he took my spirit to the heaven of heavens. I saw there a house built of hailstones. Between the stones were tongues of living fire. My spirit saw a circle that encircled the house of fire. You have the four sides with rivers full of living fire. This is also very interesting when you have in mind the vision of the celestial Jerusalem at the end of the book of Ezekiel, with the rivers flowing, but here it's a fire, river of fire. And around it, seraphim and cherubim and ophanim, which are the wheels. So the wheels as part of the chariot, and I think this speaks of we were speaking of the metonymic relation between the deity, who cannot be represented, and the materiality of the throne. And in this metonymic relationship, the material elements become themselves holy and living. And this is the case of the ophanim. And we did not speak about them in the book of Ezekiel, but they already have eyes, so they can see. And I saw angels that could not be counted, thousands of thousands and 10,000 times 10,000. They were surrounding that house. And you have also named angel, Michael, Raphael, and Gabriel, and Phanuel, which is the angel of the faith, and the holy angels. And here you see that this community of celestial beings is becoming immense, and that some are named, many are groups with a specific function. Seraphim, they are lauding, they are blessing, singing, and we find our cherubim in their place at the side of the throne. And I think that this is really the moment when our hybrid creatures enter the court, the orders of angels. They are no longer represented with the bull or eagle or lion faces. No, they are entering this contemplation of the divine throne. And this is what Enoch sees. It does not describe their animality anymore, their hybridity anymore. So this is, I think this is what I wanted to share with you about this. And if we go a little further with the book of Second Enoch, which witnesses are much later. We have them translated in the Middle Ages. And with scholars, specialists of that book, think that it might have been translated from Aramaic or Hebrew, because there are some ways of naming things that are Aramaism or Hebraism. But historically it is very difficult to date it. And in this Second Enoch, then we find our cherubim, and this time they are also along part of multitude of angels. And what is interesting is that we find them grouped in armies. There is in French we would say milice, like militia. And there we find in this testimony that this armed character of the cherubim that we knew in Genesis 3 has survived somehow. So I think this is what we can tell about how our cherubim became angels. And from that time on, if we consider that first Enoch is, before Christian era, 3rd century BCE, Common Era, or then when you look at the different Christian and Judaic texts, then the cherubim, they have lost their hybridity and they have become angels along with other celestial beings, adoring and blessing the only one God. Another interesting thing about this cherubim that comes from the book of Ezekiel is the reception that will be made of the chariot. So you have this mystic trend in Judaism, the Merkava, and you have also in many apocryphal texts the reception, the transmission and the reception of this chariot of the cherubim. Yes.
Fascinating. Yeah, that's really, really interesting.
There is maybe one small thing that I would like to add, and maybe I will share because I had prepared this in case. It's why cherubim are often represented as a small infant child. Yeah, in a childish way. And of course, the representation, the picture you have there is a virgin and child with 4 cherubs. So you see how infant they look. And this is sometimes the way we imagine them nowadays when you don't have all this in mind. So this is a representation by the famous painter Donatello and sculptor from Firenze in the 15th century. But I find it interesting that, and this is my colleague Christoph Bach in the same book who speaks about this. So this is a translation of what he has written there. Why do we represent cherubim as little childish angels? And it goes back to the Talmud. So maybe it's not so recent. The Tractate Hagiga in the Babylonian Talmud, where you have the sages that were, so the rabbis, that were a bit annoyed because the 4 figures that we have spoken of in Ezekiel 1 are not exactly the 4 figures that you find in Ezekiel 10. And so they see that in chapter 1, there are the faces of man, lion, bull, and eagle. But in chapter 10, the bull has disappeared and is replaced by a cherub. And so Resh Lakish said, Ezekiel prayed about this and said, Master of the universe, how can an accuser become an advocate? Because, of course, the bull is connected with the golden calf and the foreign Baalim, so accusing Israel. And therefore, he cannot exercise the function of advocates of Israel attributed to the cherubim. But what did the word cherub mean and what face did it adopt? The Amoraim then asked. And I find this explanation. Cherub means like a child, because in Babylonia, that is in Araman, a child is called Revia. So Ravia, Cherub, read Ravia becomes like a child. And so the 4 faces of the cherubim are therefore lion, eagle, man, and child. So maybe this is the last thing that we could not miss concerning our cherubim.
That's great. That's awesome. That's amazing. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. I never heard that before. That's really, really interesting. So that's the book of Enoch, or 1 and 2 Enoch. Does the Greek life of Adam and Eve have any descriptions or comments on this conversation that help us understand the transformation of it?
Yes, I mean, after I am not a specialist to this apocryphal literature, but in this apocryph, there are Judaic and Christian apocryphs. You have many references to this chariot of the Cherubim, and so you understand that this image, this reception of the chariot was was pursued actively, and you find it in different texts. So yes, we can quote the Greek life of Adam and Eve, but there are many other texts also. No, and it does not. I mean, it does not add much to what my point is about the transformation and the mutation from animal hybrid creature to celestial and angelic creatures, but only to say that the reception was very active in this representation of the chariot as a locomotion, also as a way of locomotion. You have in one text also Abraham. It's very funny. Is using the chariot of the cherubim to travel around. So yes.
Fascinating. Okay. You've mentioned the winged chariot several times. Did you have anything to add from Greek and Mesopotamian influences regarding the winged chariot, how people understood that?
Yeah, this is a point that I would like to dig further in my own research, because now I just mentioned it in my article, because I think if you refer to Plato and the winged souls, you might understand much better the prophetism of Ezekiel. Because pure souls are the one who can approach the deity in Plato, and I think this is what the prophetism in Ezekiel is trying to tell us, that the prophet, as the son of Adam, Ben Adam, he is called son of Adam, so as the son of first human being, in that purity, I would say, he comes so close to the deity so as to be able to witness to the deity and contemplate also, and see that this deity you have in the first chapter is as human parts. So I think this, I would like to dig that point further. Very often when you work in a historical and comparative approach, biblical scholars, they work in the light of cuneiform studies, but more and more it becomes evident that the Levant was at the crossroads of cuneiform influences and Greek influences. So there are many things that I would like to dig further concerning this Greek influence that I could not really work until now on the prophetism of Ezekiel. Yeah.
Thank you.
That would be for next time.
Yeah, next time. That'll be great. All right. And so you've basically talked about this, but was there anything you wanted to add about just why scholars would say that the conception of cherubim, why they changed over time, why they went from the description of the biblical text to what we see in the other texts and pictures we've talked about?
About this mutation of the cherubim, I think it has to do with the religious evolution in the Levant and in Jerusalem, of course, with this one God becoming one, and also becoming transcendent, unrepresentable. And I think that his court slowly, like him, became representable. There is something of the evolution of the religion that is drawing away from materiality. And I think this works together.
So
that is why, like when we think of angels, there is also in the book, there is also a nice article from Françoise Vinel on the angels in the writing of the fathers of the church. And I think she has very interesting remarks concerning the fact that angels are not represented. You don't know if they are men or women. You don't have any descriptions about them, you know? And so this stems to the immaterial conception that theologians make of God. Something drawing away from representation and materiality must speak. I don't know if it does, but I'm saying what they should speak of transcendent, the transcendent God. Yeah.
That's really fascinating. So in your paper, it's okay if you're not prepared for this, but in your paper, you mentioned that oftentimes the seraphim and the cherubim are they're confused in ancient literature. Off the top of your head, do you have any examples of that happening?
Now I don't have in mind the
Okay.
text, but yeah, I don't have in mind. But sometimes you see in the Hebrew Bible, the seraphim, they are the one to I don't know if you say that laudatio is the blessing of God. They sing holy, 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 the Trisagion. They are the one singing the holiness of God. And the cherubim, as we said, their function is different, and they are protecting, defending, and in this metonymic relation, representing the divine. But in the Hebrew text, they are not singers, no? And when you take letter reception, so from the Judaic and Christian text, then you see that these functions are a bit confused between who should be singing, who should be defending. I mean, they have become angels anyway.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, as their kind of roles are blended together.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on here.
Thank you
It's been
to
a pleasure.
you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
So you have the book that you've been mentioning there, and was there any other work that you want people to know about that people can check out?
Yes, there is a wonderful book from my colleague Delphine Lauritsen, which is also French. It is called Inventer les anges, Inventing the Angels. And it was published in 2021. It's a huge book, I think more than 1,000 pages. It's written in French. I think maybe some articles are in English, but I'm not sure. Inventer, Inventing les anges, the angels. And I think that is really, I think this is part of all the work that is done today on the historical evolutions of these, what was before only conceptualized as theological objects. Now they can be looked at in a historical way. And I think it's as you say, fascinating.
Yeah, that's awesome. Awesome. Yeah, so I'll put that in the description as well for my audience. Thank you so much for coming on here. And
Thank you.
I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, thank you so much. Bye.